and welcome to Islam Explained. Today we have Dr. Omer Ergi and Dr. Nuri Balta on the program. Dr. Omer is a theologian and Dr. Nuri is a physicist. I'd like to welcome you both.
Thank you.
My first question is to Dr. Omer. Many extraordinary events occurred on the night of the Prophet Muhammad's birth. According to historical records, one of these were that a new star had appeared in the night sky. Do we know what this star is and how it just appeared on that night?
Yes, yes, Faisal. Actually, there is a number of events that took place on that night. We call them miraculous events, extraordinary events. We can sort of list some of them, some of the significant ones, such as the Great Persian Empire. They had this huge palace where we can say the pillars of the palace, there were 14 of them, cracked and sort of collapsed on that night when the Prophet was born. And there's a lake in Iraq which is called Lake Sawa, and people used to worship, found this lake as sacred, that suddenly dried up in one night. And also in Mecca, you know, where the Kaaba is, within the Kaaba, they used to have all these idols people used to worship. They say that most of these idols on that night, the birth of the noble Prophet ﷺ, they just fell on their faces on the same instant. There were amazing events. And like you said, one of these was the birth of a new star on that night. On the night of the Prophet's birth. There are historical evidence for this event. In the Tabakat of Ibn Sa'd, it is reported that Ibn Abbas said some prominent Jewish scholars stated that the star of Ahmed was born on that night. So you can see that the name given to the star by the Jewish scholars was Ahmed. It's very interesting. An unusually bright star suddenly appeared in the night sky, and one of the very famous Jewish scholars who later on converted to Islam, his name is Abdullah ibn Salam, he said, when I was a teenager in Medina, my family members, my relatives were all Jewish scholars, very renowned people of the scripture. I heard them when I was a teenager on that night saying that tonight Ahmed's star have born. And they said that a new prophet is coming. So there are a number of reports in regards to this. There is also one report, again, this also appears in Ibn Sa'd, where it is reported that one Jewish man living in Mecca, actually in Mecca, he came to the Quraysh, the people of the Arabs of Mecca, and he said, did anyone give birth to a baby boy last night? And they said, why are you asking? We don't know. He said, go and knock on the doors, because the star of Ahmed appeared last night, and this boy will be the last prophet. And the Jews knew this in their scriptures. It's very interesting. So there was a star really appearing on that night. And in regards to this star, we have an astronomical explanation too, but I am going to later on leave that to Dr. Nuri to explain in detail, but I just want to make an introduction to it, sort of. Because we know in astronomy, stars just don't appear like that in the night sky suddenly, popping up. However, there is an event that occurs in the cosmos, and it's one of the most spectacular and most powerful events in the universe. We really call this a supernova explosion. This usually happens when a star, reaches its life limit, because all stars have what we call is lifespans as well. Approximately, they say this is about 10 billion years. And when they reach the end of their lives, they start to sort of cool off, and this causes a pressure to drop and the heavy elements in their cores makes the star collapse onto itself. And this all happens very quickly, they said, maybe 10 to 12 seconds. As the core collapses, it sends enormous shock waves, which cause the outer layers of the star to explode. And this is spectacular. I think the star that really appeared on the night of the Prophet's birth was actually a supernova.
Thank you very much, Dr. Omer. Dr. Balta, can I have your perspectives on this? the star that appeared on the night of the prophet's birth, are we able to identify this star today?
Unfortunately, we cannot identify it. As we know, there is no star of Ahmed on the sky. When we look at sky, nobody tells us this is the star of Ahmed. Unfortunately, we don't know.
Okay. So my second question then to you, Dr. Balta, if Muslims recorded everything, why wasn't this star identified by scholars back in that time?
Okay, good question. Thank you. The report, there is actually one report about this star, about this star. It says that it appeared suddenly. Okay, but we know in astronomy, the stars, they do not appear suddenly. The birth of stars takes millions of years. That's why it was not a star, as Mr. Omer explained briefly. I will go into details. It was most probably a supernova. So what happens is the stars the star formation start in the nebula, in a nebula. What's a nebula? So when we look at sky, we see the stars, the planets, and moon, and the other several astronomical objects. But actually, there are a lot, and there are different type of objects, huge objects at space. We have galaxies, we have stars, we have neutron stars, we have black holes, we have quasars, and many others. And the distance between the typical distance between stars are approximately 5 light year, 10 light year, 100 light years. But the distance between the galaxies are 2 billion light years, 3 billion light years, 10 billion light years. So there is a huge space in between the galaxies, and this space is occupied sometimes by nebula. So nebulae are a cloud of dust and hydrogen and somehow little other molecules. And they are spread in between the distance in between the galaxies, and their total mass is thousands of billions of mass of the sun. So they are distributed on a very huge space in between the galaxies. So there is a balance of these clouds. We call them nebula, but they are a kind of cloud. And at some regions of these clouds, because of some regions, maybe a nearby explosion, supernova explosion, makes a disturbance. It unbalances the nebula, some part of it, and the gas at a certain region starts collapse into itself. It accumulates at a certain place, and then it grows up. Its mass increases and increases. As its mass increases, it pulls more and more mass, and then because of the gravitational attraction, this accumulated gas starts, due to the gravitational compression, the pressure starts increasing. So two things happens together. The mass increases, it attracts more and more gases, and then the pressure also increases. At a critical pressure, at the center of the new, let's say, a prostar, at the center, the temperature increases and increases. Once the temperature increases to about 10,000 Kelvin, hydrogen molecules separate, and then they recombine, and they make helium. And during this fusion process, the heat is released. And when the amount of heat is released sufficiently, our new prostar starts glowing. It emits light. And all these processes, what I'm trying to explain, takes millions of years. And once the star is formed, it shines. Okay, then it becomes a star like our star. Our sun is a normal size star, but we have big sized stars, maybe 10 times, 1,000 times, 10,000 times bigger than our star. Some of these kind of stars are also formed. And just like birth of a child, star is now, it grows up, and then it continues its life for about, for example, 5 billion years. And toward the end of its life, if it has a huge mass, I mean bigger than our sun, then the energy which is provided by the hydrogen at the core of the star, now all of it, I mean, all of the hydrogen atoms are fused, and they are turned into helium, and then its energy is the energy of the star finishes. And once the energy finish, the gravitational attraction pushes, I mean, the collapse the star on itself. Why? Because the balance of the star is because of two forces: the gravitational force and the outward force produced by the nuclear reactions. They are in equilibrium until a certain time, but once the energy inside the star finishes, the gravitational force collapses, apply more force on the core of the star, and there pressure increases and increases, and then because of this increase of the pressure, electrons and protons are combined. They turn into neutrons, and during this process, the neutrinos and other gamma rays are produced, and this process actually happens so quickly in seconds, and then it makes an energy release outward, and this energy released in the center of the star pushes the outer layers of the star to the space. And what happens is a huge amount of energy. Let me explain how much energy is released during this explosion, which is called supernova. So, for example, our sun is not going to explode, but assume it is going to explode as a supernova. During the explosion, the amount of energy released is almost equal to the energy which is released all the time of the sun. So it releases suddenly so much energy that it shines almost all of the galaxy. If the supernova, if it happens in a certain galaxy, once it is exploded, it shines all of the galaxy. That's why so much energy is released. We can see them from distance, even though they are in other. What?
Is it short-lived, that energy, that explosion?
This explosion lasts, I mean, maybe one day, sometimes depends on the size of the explosion. It can be 1 week, 2 weeks, but not more than that usually.
Okay.
So at that night, most probably it was a supernova explosion, which was seen by scholars at that time.
It's remarkable, Dr. Balta, just that process of a supernova happening. Now, just another question. Do supernovas leave remnants behind? If so, like, can we actually detect them?
Yes, once the supernovas are exploded, they become either a neutron star or they become a black hole. But the outer layers ejected to the space, we can detect that. We can detect that. And today, on NASA's website, you can see many remnants of the supernova explosions. And we can also determine their age. So, some interested astronomers, I think they can determine, they can look at the age of the supernovas. I mean, they can look at the remnants of the supernovas, and from there they can determine which supernova was that. This is possible. So some Islamic astronomers or some other maybe interested astronomers can find which supernova was that.
Okay. I'll just turn to Dr. Omer. Dr. Omer, are there any verses in the Quran that indicate the supernovas?
Yes, Faisal. I believe that there are a few verses in the Quran which sort of indicate the supernovas. One of them is in Surah Tariq, and the verse begins, or the surah begins with "Was-sama'i wat-tariq." Very interesting. By the heavens and the star. That's the translation into English. And then it continues as "Wama adraka mat-tariq." Can you comprehend which star this is? So there is an emphasis on comprehension. It indicates that this star is unique. It's not unlike the other rest of the stars we observe in the night sky. And the verse, the third part of the verse says, "An-najmu thaqib." It is a piercingly bright star. As Dr. Nuri explained, it would be very bright. Supernovas are very bright. In fact, I read somewhere that the one article, it says, if it's big enough, it can be seen from all corners of the universe, a supernova. That's very, very amazing explosion. So the Quran uses this term as well. It says, "An-najmu thaqib." It is a piercingly bright star. So we know that it is very bright, this star, but piercingly is a very interesting term too, because we know that, as Dr. Nuri explained, that if the star is big enough, massive enough, such as at the size of, let us say, Antares or Deneb or Betelgeuse, these stars, when they start collapsing after the supernova, the collapse won't stop, at the level of being a neutron star. It continues to collapse, and it's so massive that it actually punctures a hole within the space. It becomes a black hole. It's so heavy. So piercing is a very interesting word used by the Quran as well there. So it sort of gives me the impression that the Quran is talking about supernovas. And there is another verse which is quite similar to it, and that's the Surah Najm. It says, "When Najmi idha hawa." And when I look at all the, hermeneutics of this term there, it's talking about a star again. It says, "By the star that fade away, fall apart, or collapse." This is very interesting. The term collapse is very interesting to me, because in a way it's talking about supernovas, because they collapse, as Dr. Nuri explained. So I can see that these two verses within the Quran, the Holy Quran, indicates to supernovas as well. This is my view as well, yeah.
I think it's just remarkable, just those extraordinary events that have just occurred with the Prophet Muhammad's birth. So many things coming together just on that night. Remarkable events, a supernova that only probably just lasted for a couple of days, maybe a week or two, as you said, Dr. Balta, and yourself, Dr. Omer. Very remarkable. I'd like to thank both of you for coming to the program, and I'd like to thank our viewers as well. And if you've enjoyed today's session, I'd like for you to also subscribe to the channel and a thumbs up, and would like to see you again another time. Thank you.